Hello, folks. I'm Josh McGee, and welcome to another episode of the Gateway to Soccer Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, I am back after a 1-week break. I took some time away to take care of a few things, but I am back and excited to get back to the show. It's going to be a huge episode this week. I'm very excited for it. As you can see behind me here in the home studio, got a lot of orange. Over here on this shoulder, old Chelsea away jersey, and then over here, the brand new Netherlands home jersey. That, of course, is in honor of them starting up World Cup qualifiers this week, but also this week was the 5-year anniversary of the passing of legend Johan Cruyff, just a tremendous player, tremendous impact on the game. Wanted to honor him here this week, but also the orange is for my great guest who I'll be talking to a little bit later on in the show. So let's get into it. There's a lot of soccer going on right now, of course, but I want to start off this week's episode by talking about these guys, the U.S. men's national team, the important week that they have ahead of them. And I kind of want to give a little bit of a State of the Union type address on the national team and where they are headed in the future. The U.S. men's national team will be in action over the next few days with friendlies versus CONCACAF opponent Jamaica and Northern Ireland. Also going on right now, the U.S. under-23s are currently trying to qualify for this summer's Olympics. Up until this point, this has kind of been the honeymoon phase with U.S. men's national team head coach Greg Berhalter. Outside of a few high-profile friendlies and a few other somewhat important matches, we've yet to hit the point in the schedule where he truly earns his title. Yet that has not stopped fans to quickly criticize Berhalter over team selection and some of the other things that he has done as coach, even though, of course, we have not hit those important matches. That all changes this fall when the U.S. begins qualifiers for the 2022 World Cup. I almost feel bad for Berhalter and these players because since really the turn of the century, there hasn't been a lot of pressure on the U.S. men's national team at this stage. Qualifying for the World Cup has almost been a formality, really, over the past few attempts for the U.S. It's always been about what comes next. How does the U.S. do in the World Cup? Unfortunately, that world was shattered when the U.S. failed to qualify for the 2018 World Cup. That anger and that shock from them missing out is still there. That, of course, adds more pressure onto Berhalter and the rest of the team as they attempt to qualify for this upcoming World Cup. However, since we're on the cusp of a couple of important friendlies over the next few days, as well as the ongoing Olympics qualifying attempt, I thought this would be a good time to reflect on how much the U.S. men's national team has developed since that fatal loss and how this group of young players could be the ones to right that wrong and to continue to push U.S. soccer forward. So go back with me to that fatal night in October 2017 when the U.S. lost to Trinidad and Tobago to fail to qualify for the 2018 World Cup. Think about the makeup of that U.S. team. You still had Tim Howard in goal. You had the likes of Matt Beasler and Omar Gonzalez starting at center back. You still had Michael Bradley patrolling the midfield. You had Josie Altidore up top. You had U.S. veterans such as DeMarcus Beasley and Clint Dempsey being important parts of that squad. Now, my math may be a little bit off here trying to go back and think of the ages of those players for that game, but roughly the average age of the players on that squad was almost 29 years old. Now, fast forward to this current U.S. men's national team roster, or at least the initial roster that was announced, the average age of a player on that roster was 23 years and 27 days, basically a 6 years difference in age. And that pretty much shows how much of a transition the U.S. national team has gone over these past few years. Also, something else to drive that point home, only 3 players made this current roster who were also on the roster that night when the U.S. faced Trinidad and Tobago. Those players would be Tim Ream, Kellen Acosta, and Christian Pulisic. And I think most of us can agree that only one of those guys is most likely to make a roster should the U.S. qualify for the 2022 World Cup. Think about it. Pulisic was a young 18-year-old back then, just breaking into Borussia Dortmund. Now, if you think about it, he may only play for the 5th biggest club in the world among potential U.S. men's national team players. We got Serginho Dest at Barcelona. We got Weston McKennie at Juventus. We got Zach Steffen at Manchester City. This used to be, a pipe dream to have players at these types of clubs. Now, of course, really, this has become the norm. We see so many U.S. men's national team players, potential ones at least, making the flock to Europe, and not just being on these rosters, but being pivotal parts of their campaigns. These players have helped U.S. soccer expand their reach around the world, and they continue to develop at faster rates than in years past. There are a lot of reasons to be endlessly optimistic about this team when you consider that this trend was unthinkable just a few years ago. However, with the expectation that the final roster for World Cup qualifiers will include a lot of young players, that of course opens them up to a potential letdown. You would expect a response from the U.S. men's national team after failing to qualify in 2018, also because the scenario that would play out should they fail to qualify again would be astronomically horrible. changes would be made not only to the manager, but to the program as a whole and how they tackle CONCACAF World Cup qualifiers. It would be a nightmare scenario. I definitely think we'll see a response from this team that they should be able to qualify for next year's World Cup. However, I will caveat it with this. In terms of the development of these young players and getting them ready to compete at the top level of international soccer, I think the focus for the U.S. should be to qualify for this upcoming World Cup, have a somewhat decent showing. I continue to maintain that if you're going to flop at a World Cup, this is the one to do it at in terms of where it's at and how it's been set up. I think the focus for the U.S. should be 2026 with this young group of players. And of course, the World Cup coming to U.S. soil at that time, the U.S. should continue to stay on their path of developing these young players, getting them ready to realize their potential by the year 2026. I think if we continue to stay on that path, things will work out. I understand the scrutiny. I understand the pressure that is under the U.S. team with this upcoming qualifying campaign for this next World Cup. But we must understand that these players are young. We have a brighter future than we did on that night versus Trinidad and Tobago, and the development is there. So we must continue to trust the process, to support what is going on, and hopefully the U.S. men's national team will get right back on track and qualify for the next World Cup. So I'm excited to check out the U.S. men's national team over the next few days, and I will recap the action from both matches on next week's episode. Now I want to get to some of the action that happened while I was away, and of course I'm referring to the UEFA Champions League. We've made it to the quarterfinal stage. We've had the draw. We've also had the draw for potential semifinal and final matchups, but before we get too far down that road, I just want to break down my initial thoughts on the quarterfinal matchups that will be coming up here in just a couple weeks. Of course, we've got to start off with the biggest one of the bunch. That would be Bayern Munich versus PSG. That is a rematch of last year's final, which Bayern Munich won 1-0 on a goal from Kingsley Coman. Both these teams are, of course, incredibly deep, and PSG are expected to get back Neymar for this tie. Of course, he's been out with a long-term injury, but he will once again be fully fit and paired with Kylian Mbappe to go up against Bayern Munich, who right now, in my opinion, are the best team in the world at the club level. They've averaged 3 goals a game in the Champions League so far this season. They've just been tremendously dominant, but this will be really their first true test going up against one of the other favorites of this tournament. Like I said, both these teams are extremely deep. I think PSG depend upon their stars a little bit more than Bayern Munich. Talking about Mbappe and Neymar, they do have some talent there in the midfield with the likes of Verratti, but it's going to be a tough task. They're going to have to find a way to shut down Bayern Munich, and they got to find a way to balance what they were doing against Barcelona in that first leg, where they were tremendous going forward. They were able to snuff out Barcelona attacks and try to avoid what happened in the second leg. They got too conservative. They let Barcelona get a little bit of momentum. A comeback was potentially on until Messi had that penalty stop. Who knows what could have happened if that had gone in. So PSG, they have to be adventurous. They have to be aggressive. Otherwise, Bayern are just going to peg them back, and they're going to find a way to completely control this tie. So I still favor Bayern. I think team-wise, they're just a more complete team. They're on the best form as of right now, but PSG are definitely one of those clubs who are very much capable of knocking them out of this tournament. Moving on to Manchester City versus Borussia Dortmund. And how about this for a storyline? Dortmund's top 2 players have previous ties to City. The tournament's leading goal scorer, Erling Haaland, will be facing the club that his father once played for, and alongside him is Jadon Sancho, who came up through the youth system at Manchester City. Those two will be leading the line for Dortmund and trying to break down that dominant City defense, but the main key to this matchup is going to be Dortmund's defense. We saw that against Sevilla. They let in a ton of goals. They were barely able to escape that round of 16 tie. Now, of course, they go up against Manchester City, who are one of the more dominant offenses in all of Europe. Can they find a way to plug the holes in that defense while also maintaining that same attacking firepower? I got to go with City in this matchup. I think they'll exploit that Dortmund defense. They just don't have the personnel really to deal with what City is going to throw at them. I just think that right now, the way that their defense has also been playing this year, I think they're going to do the best job on Haaland that we've seen any team really do, especially over these past 2 months. You've got Ruben Diaz and John Stones there, 2 big center backs. Of course, Diaz has been a godsend for City this season. I think he'll be the main man to stop Haaland. I think City will find a way to contain that attack, also put in a few goals here. I think they will find a way to move on to the semifinals of the Champions League. The next quarterfinal matchup is a rematch of the 2018 Champions League final between Real Madrid and Liverpool. Both these clubs are not as good as they have been in years past, but they still boast a lot of the same players from that final matchup. I think it's going to come down to which frontline players assert their will over the opposing defense. On one side for Liverpool, you've got Sadio Mane and Mo Salah. They've been the ones putting the goals for that club. We saw what they could do in the last tie versus RB Leipzig. For Real Madrid, it's mostly been about Karim Benzema. He was missing during that first leg versus Atalanta. Madrid struggled. He returns. He scores a goal. Madrid were able to comfortably win that second leg. He's going to need a little bit of help, but in terms of the overall talent on the pitch, this is why I would favor Real Madrid just slightly ahead of Liverpool. I think as you work your way back, Madrid just have better numbers in the midfield and in defense. I definitely think this could be close. This could go to extra time in the second leg. Of course, I'm just looking forward to the drama of Mo Salah and Sergio Ramos being back on the same pitch after that incident in the 2018 final. Should be a very entertaining contest. I favor Madrid slightly to go through, but I definitely think it could go either way. And lastly, of course, the final quarterfinal matchup is Chelsea versus FC Porto. Now, I'm not going to come out here and hide the fact that this is probably the best case scenario for Chelsea, but we cannot deny anymore how dangerous of a side Porto is. They may not be the biggest club in this tournament, but they must be taken seriously after they were able to upset Juventus in the previous round. Chelsea, of course, haven't lost since Thomas Tuchel took over as manager, but how are they going to handle going up against an opportunistic attack like Porto? In the previous tie, they faced off against Atletico Madrid, who weren't very aggressive going forward, so Chelsea were able to control both legs of that tie. How do they handle Porto, who are going to be a little bit more aggressive? They're playing with house money. They've got nothing to lose. They're once again a pretty big underdog in this tie. How do Chelsea handle being an overwhelming favorite? As well as the fact that they continue to struggle a little bit scoring goals. Still favor Chelsea in this tie. I think their overall talent and their defensive form will stay consistent, and they'll find a way to keep Porto off the board. But I definitely think this tie could be much closer than people are giving it credit for. Still favor Chelsea, but I also think that this one will be close. So those are the upcoming quarterfinal matchups in the Champions League. Now, of course, we know the potential semifinal matchups and final matchups that we could have down the road. We know the winner of Bayern versus PSG will face the winner of Manchester City versus Dortmund, and vice versa, the winner of Real Madrid versus Liverpool will face the winner of Chelsea versus Porto. I don't want to look too far down the road. We need to see where the chips fall in these matchups. I definitely think that at least 3, if not all 4 matchups will be close. So we'll just have to see at that time who makes it to the semifinals, and then we will go from there. Don't want to jump the gun on any potential analysis when we really don't know who will be advancing from the quarterfinals. So very exciting. Some big-time matchups, some matchups that really could be considered a final in any other year, but we're getting them now. Very excited to see some more Champions League action. All right, since there won't be much club soccer going on this weekend due to the international break, I thought it would be a great time to highlight some of the news and notes coming out of this current international break and maybe analyze some of the matches also going on, especially those World Cup qualifiers. But I do want to start off with some big news that broke a few weeks ago in terms of international soccer that I really do want to highlight here, and that would be the German FA announcing that manager Joachim Löw will be stepping down as the coach of the German national team after the 2020 Euros. Löw has been there for a very long time. Of course, he's a World Cup winner with Germany, but he'll be stepping aside, and Germany will be on the lookout for a new manager for the first time in nearly 15 years. Think about that. There have not been many German managers in the history of that national team. They just have a tremendous grasp on how to develop players, how to consistently stay at the top of international soccer. But it's time for a change. It's time for a fresh perspective. And when you see this next crop of young players that Germany are starting to gather, they're starting to develop the next golden generation of those types of players, will be a good time to bring in a new manager to help lead them into the future. But unquestioned, Löw was a success with the German national team. Quite a career, of course. They'll be considered one of the favorites at the upcoming Euros here this summer, but it'll be really cool to see how Germany continues to develop and to move forward with the new manager. Okay, so since we're on an international break, the big thing right now, of course, is World Cup qualifiers, and we had our very first round of UEFA World Cup qualifiers. Kind of want to break down a few of them for you and provide an update here on some of those results. On day one, we saw the reigning champions, France, held to a 1-1 draw versus Ukraine. France put out a pretty strong squad. Antoine Griezmann got on the score sheet, but they were held there to a draw. Turkey crushed the Netherlands 4-2 behind a hat trick from their captain, Burak Yilmaz. Some truly wonderful strikes by that guy. I mean, fantastic goals. And of course, the Netherlands, obviously they don't have Virgil van Dijk at center back, and they're missing maybe 1 or 2 other guys, but still, it was quite the impressive performance there by Turkey on the very first day. Elsewhere, you had Belgium versus Wales. Wales got out to a quick 1-0 lead after they scored in the 10th minute, but Belgium scored 3 unanswered goals to come away with the 3-1 win. I believe Kevin De Bruyne and Romelu Lukaku each got on the score sheet during that match. And lastly, Portugal, again, put out a strong squad. Cristiano Ronaldo was in the starting lineup. They struggled a little bit versus Azerbaijan, but they were able to come away with a 1-0 victory. Portugal, it's a sneaky team. They've actually been able to develop a lot of talent over these past few years. Think about Ruben Diaz in defense, Bruno Fernandes also joining in on attack with Ronaldo. It's a very interesting side. So again, some close results there, but also I think that Turkey win over the Netherlands was pretty shocking to me in terms of how big the scoreline was. But some good results there on day one. Then on day two, you had some of the other big boys, England, Italy, and Germany all come away with shutout victories. Particularly impressed with England, who won 5-0 over San Marino. And then Germany, an easy 3-0 victory over Iceland, a quality opponent. You got goals from Leon Goretzka, Ilkay Gundogan, and Kai Havertz in that match, 2 of which came in the first 7 minutes of that match. So very particularly dominant displays from those 3 sides. Some other results that stood out, Spain were held to a 1-1 draw versus Greece, a particularly uninspiring performance there from Spain. Elsewhere, you had Hungary play to an amazing 3-3 draw versus Poland. I believe 5 of the 6 goals came in the second half, especially a few late. I know there's a late red card as well. Very entertaining match. Also, Scotland played to a 2-2 draw versus Austria. A couple of even sides there. Also, a lot of late goals in that match as well. So again, a lot of entertaining results. Of course, these are the early stages of the World Cup qualifiers, so no time to panic just yet. There'll be more matches this weekend on Saturday and Sunday, and also next week on Tuesday and Wednesday. I think I'll provide a bit of an update on the tables there once all these matches have been played. But a lot of soccer going on this international break now that we have the World Cup qualifiers coming up for all the different continents. And again, of course, UEFA definitely want to be paying attention to some of those bigger clubs and see who all will be qualifying in the early stages here for the World Cup. Now, while there may be World Cup qualifiers going on across different continents around the world, one place where they aren't going on would be South America. We talked a few weeks ago about the cancellation of those World Cup qualifiers in that continent with Santiago. I want to provide a little bit of an update and context to those cancellations. CONMEBOL officials have been warned that any further disruptions to the qualifier schedule would result in the schedule not being completed in time for next year's World Cup. I don't want to even think about potential scenarios that could lead to. I don't want to even think about potentially South America not being represented at the World Cup. Can you even really call it a World Cup in that situation? But they've got to find a way to get these qualifiers going. One potential solution to that would be moving the qualifiers to Europe and playing at neutral sites. There are a lot of these players right now who are playing in Europe. That would give them an opportunity for the international teams to call in their best players instead of having to worry about COVID protocols. That's basically what this is about. The pandemic has really hit South America hard, and teams have not been able to release their players. They've been really reluctant because of the situation there. And of course, with these cancellations, we know it's a huge problem. Potential solution there, move them to Europe, neutral sites, have those players who are already in that continent join their international teams. That hasn't been made official yet. That's just some speculation, but they've got to find a solution, of course, get these things going. They already started them up, so they're already a few matches in. They've got to find an even keel scenario that is fair for all teams involved in order to get them to qualify for the World Cup. So hopefully South America able to figure out a solution. So of course, and again, it's just some great soccer to see. Some of those teams, Brazil, Argentina, Colombia, etc. So great to watch. Got to see them out on the pitch. We got to see them competing to qualify for the World Cup. And lastly, like I mentioned at the top of the episode, the U.S. under-23s are currently trying to qualify for this summer's Olympics. They lost a close match 1-0 on Wednesday night to Mexico, but they still advanced to the semifinals as they came in second in that group. They will face the winner of Group A, which will either be Honduras or Canada, with the other team facing Mexico. The winners of those 2 semifinal matches, despite meeting in a final, will qualify for this upcoming Olympics. So it's paramount that the U.S. at least win this semifinal matchup, whoever they face off against. It was tough again, performance versus Mexico. They had some chances to crawl back into that match, but they were unable to do so. But still, they got an opportunity here to qualify for the Olympics, just win the semifinals matchup. Hoping that happens. I mean, if you saw earlier this week, Christian Pulisic said he might be interested in playing for the Olympic team. Not sure if Chelsea will allow him to do so, but still, it's a huge opportunity for the U.S. to continue to develop these young players, some of which have prospects as to potentially making a World Cup qualifier or World Cup roster for the U.S. So again, it's a really good opportunity to showcase these young players, and hopefully we can get back in the Olympics. So again, U.S. moving on to the semifinals there with an opportunity to qualify for the upcoming Olympics. Okay, it's time to talk some soccer in America, and I'm going to start off with MLS. And the big news from the league this week was the announcement of the full schedule for the upcoming 2021 season. A lot of great matches on it, of course, but I did want to highlight when we will see the debut of the brand new home stadiums for 3 of the MLS clubs. First one to get that opportunity will be FC Cincinnati when they play host to Inter Miami CF in their brand new stadium on May 16th. They'll be followed by expansion club Austin FC debuting their new stadium on June 19th when they take on the San Jose Earthquakes. And then lastly, the reigning champions Columbus Crew SC will debut their brand new stadium on July 3rd when they take on the New England Revolution. So again, very exciting that we'll get to see those brand new stadiums this year. But of course, again, a lot of great entertaining matches on the schedule. I believe a rematch of the MLS Cup final from last year between Columbus and Seattle is later on down in the schedule. Of course, we've got all the rivalries. We've got the decision day schedule. Very exciting news. The MLS season is just around the corner. And of course, we know it all kick off here in mid-April, I believe on April 17th or so, around that time. Again, very exciting that we'll have the return here of the MLS. We know the full slate of matches that each team will be playing. Some other big news from this week, the joint announcement from MLS and Liga MX concerning the return of the Leagues Cup and the Campeones Cup in 2021. Sporting Kansas City, Seattle Sounders FC, Orlando City SC, and NYC FC will be representing MLS in the Leagues Cup versus 4 sides from Liga MX. It's those sides because they were the top finishing teams in either conference from last year's regular season who aren't already committed to the CONCACAF Champions League. In terms of the Campeones Cup, that of course will go to the Columbus Crew SC, and they will be taking on the Liga MX champions sometime in September. I believe the Leagues Cup will start up here in late August. So excellent opportunities for MLS and Liga MX to go head to head. Of course, there have been those rumors of a possible, combination of the 2 leagues, but this is also, again, great opportunity alongside the CONCACAF Champions League to see these 2 leagues go up against each other. So again, very exciting that we're getting back to a little bit of a normal schedule. We're getting these extra cup competitions. And yeah, again, just another good opportunity for MLS to showcase themselves against their rival league. And lastly, one interesting transaction from MLS over this past week. Former Arsenal and current West Brom defender Kieran Gibbs has agreed to join Inter Miami CF when his contract expires in the summer. The 31-year-old has over 100 appearances for West Brom and also has 10 caps to the English national team to his name. So another experienced get for David Beckham's club. You pair him up with former Stoke City center back Ryan Shawcross. You got a little interesting former Premier League duo there on that side. Should be a big help for Miami. He's a very experienced left back. I know he's maybe lost a little bit of his step from what he had at Arsenal, but still, quality defenders, played in a lot of big matches. And of course, he's got that national team experience as well. So again, another good get for Miami. Interesting to see how he will adapt and how much he will bring to that club this year. All right, let's transition over to talk some women's soccer. And I'm going to start off with the Champions League. We had the first leg of those quarterfinal matchups and some really impressive results from some of the top clubs in Europe. Starting off with Barcelona crushing Manchester City 3-0. This match took place in Italy due to the pandemic, but still, it's very impressive because Man City have been scoring a lot of goals recently. Of course, we've been following, the Americans over there, Sam Ewis, Rose Lavelle, and Abby Dahlkemper, but they were overwhelmed here. Barcelona jumped on them early and never looked back. That's going to be a really tough deficit to overcome in the second leg. Elsewhere, we had a little bit of a French rivalry matchup here. We had PSG hosting Lyon. Lyon were able to get away with a 1-0 victory thanks to a late penalty from Wendy Renard. Really cool matchup there. But of course, Lyon, they are the standard in this competition, top club in the world. They're able to get away with that 1-0 victory. Elsewhere, you had Chelsea beat Wolfsburg 2-1. They've kind of been a thorn in their side over the years, but Chelsea got goals from Sam Kerr and Pernille Harder in order to get that victory in that first leg. Elsewhere, Bayern Munich took care of business, a 3-0 win over Rosengard. That's going to be a tough deficit to overcome. They will most likely be moving on. So again, you've got a couple matchups that have already kind of been decided. Manchester City, they have a chance to come back, but you would think with Barcelona's quality, they'll be able to hold on. But I'm really interested to see how that Chelsea-Wolfsburg and that PSG-Lyon matchup finish. You would expect Lyon to get things done, but the deficit is close right now. If PSG were able to pull off that upset, that would be huge. So again, a lot to play for in the second leg here of these Champions League matchups. Next up, the U.S. women's national team announced their roster for their upcoming friendlies versus Sweden and France in a couple of weeks. Again, very 2 high-profile matchups there for friendlies. The highlight is the return of Sam Ewis, who missed out last time due to injury. She's been on fire for Manchester City since she's returned. Of course, still the most notable absence is Tobin Heath, who is continuing to recover from ankle surgery that she had in January. But still, you got pretty much all the regulars back for the U.S. women's national team. I do know that Carly Lloyd is sitting on 299 caps currently, so she could make her 300th appearance for the U.S. women's national team. Would be quite the achievement. But still, upcoming friendlies versus Sweden and France, two of the top teams in all of the world, will be an excellent opportunity for the U.S. women's national team to continue to develop ahead of the Olympics coming up this summer. And lastly, I want to highlight this landmark TV deal that the English Women's Super League were able to finalize with the BBC and Sky Sports in England. Is a multi-million-pound deal for those two networks to start showing their matches for next season. I believe 75% of the investment revenue will go back to the clubs in the Super League, with the remaining 25% going to the clubs in the Women's Championship. This deal is said to be bigger than the one that the WNBA here in America and the NWSL were able to get. So again, incredibly impressive. I know that NBC have shown a couple of women's matches, NBC Sports Network, have shown a few matches this year, some of the higher profile matches, but still this league has continued to grow, and now you get this huge big time deal in their home country to start showcasing those matches. And again, getting that money and having it go back to those clubs and going to the clubs in the Women's Championship, that's a huge landmark deal for all of them. Congrats to them. Excited to see them take this opportunity and continue to showcase themselves now on even a bigger stage here in the world. Okay, I want to wrap up this segment with a couple of news stories from the past week in the USL Championship, starting off with the announcement of the home openers for all of the clubs for the upcoming 2021 season. The season officially kicks off on April 24th when Louisville City FC play host to Atlanta United 2, as well as rivals OKC Energy FC taking on FC Tulsa. Other interesting home openers announced were Phoenix Rising FC debuting their brand new stadium on April 30th when they take on San Diego Loyal. Not sure if that was the best matchup to start off the year considering what happened last year, but I digress. Another interesting matchup on May 8th, El Paso Locomotive FC will take on rivals New Mexico United. And lastly, Oakland Roots SC, the brand new expansion club for the season, will have to wait all the way until June 19th for their home opener when they take on Sacramento Republic FC. So again, very excited to get this announcement about the home openers. The season is just a couple weeks away. Excited to see the new clubs, the new players, and of course this brand new group format that should define the season. So again, very excited. A couple weeks here, April 24th, the USL Championship will be back. The other news story of note from the USL Championship this week concerns Louisville City FC. There was a report in Sport Business this week that the club will be evaluating over the next 6 to 12 months whether to put in a bid for an MLS expansion franchise. President Brad Estes reaffirmed the club's commitment to the USL Championship this week and said that nothing has changed from their perspective. So this is understandable from Louisville. They've been one of the most dominant teams in the USL Championship over the years. They've still got that fairly new soccer-specific stadium. They're just doing their due diligence here. I'm sure they appreciate the interest, but they've been doing great things in the USL Championship. I know they wouldn't want to mess that up. So again, they've got a lot of the components that would make them a quality bid. Financially, though, there's a lot of hurdles that they would have to overcome. So we'll just have to see how this plays out. But I would think that for right now, Louisville are comfortable being in the USL Championship. Okay, moving on to talk some St. Louis soccer news. And I want to start off with a great opportunity for a former St. Louis FC player. And that would be Joaquin Rivas being called up to the El Salvador national team for their upcoming World Cup qualifiers over the next week versus Grenada and Montserrat. Rivas has been called up to the national team before, but this will be the first time that he gets to represent his country in a World Cup qualifier. So again, congrats to Joaquin, who was a great player here in St. Louis. Of course, he scored that memorable winning goal in the playoff victory over Hartford Athletic. It's been successful so far with El Salvador, and now he gets this opportunity on the biggest stage pretty much you can possibly imagine, helping them qualify for the World Cup. So great opportunity for him. I know if you want to hear a little bit more from him about it, you can check out the Lou Boys SC podcast that they dropped this week where they got to talk to Joaquin. So again, congrats to him. Looking forward to see what he can do for El Salvador. Next up, let's talk about the MASL playoffs in the St. Louis Ambush. The Kansas City Comets chose their rivals, the Ambush, as their first round opponent. The first match is tonight in Independence, with match 2 taking place at the Family Arena on Sunday. If the series is tied 1-1 after those 2 matches, a 15-minute mini match will be played after that second match. Of note, the teams split the regular series 1 apiece. So again, very interesting dynamic to these playoffs where the higher seeds get to choose their opponents and the Comets choose their rivals, the Ambush, just fueling the fire to that rivalry. Each team will get a home match. Of course, it's interesting that the Ambush will get that second match because if things are tied, then that 15-minute mini match will be played here at the Family Arena. So again, excellent opportunity for the Ambush to put up a statement win against their rival here in the playoffs. And lastly, just want to provide an update on SLU soccer. Both the men's and women's teams have begun conference play. The men's team began with wins over Dayton and St. Bonaventure before a 1-0 double overtime loss to Duquesne. They play next on Sunday when they travel to take on Dayton. The SLU women's team only have one loss still on the season, and they've won their first 3 conference matchups, including winning the first 2 in double overtime. They will next play also on Sunday when they travel to take on St. Bonaventure. So again, both SLU teams still doing well, especially in conference play. A few matches still remain before the A10 tournament, but it looks like both clubs are in excellent position to be at the forefront of the conference when we begin postseason play. So for my guest this week, I was able to bring in a player who's coming off one of the best years of her career and who's an emerging star in the NWSL. Hope you enjoy. Well, I'm honored to be joined by today a member of the Houston Dash team who will begin their Challenge Cup defense in a couple weeks' time when they take on the Chicago Red Stars, the pride of Liberty, Missouri, Shea Groom. Shea, thanks so much for joining me today.
Yes, thanks for having me.
I really appreciate it. Obviously, you guys are busy right now preparing for that first match in a couple weeks' time. You've been heavily involved in the preseason. Just want to update on how you guys have been doing with that as you prepare for the start of the regular season.
Yeah, this is definitely a unique year. You know, we had 10 weeks of preseason, definitely longer than the preseason we had last year, which was kind of crazy since we had so many new people. So, you know, the way that it came together and obviously winning a championship was a little bit unexpected given all the chemistry we had to build in such a short amount of time. But I've really enjoyed it. You know, we've had people in and out. Obviously, our internationals have been doing incredible for their country. And, you know, it's been fun to help some of the new players obviously understand the identity of the Houston Dash. And, you know, we're just flowing and, you know, getting ready into game mode now. You know, we're just about a couple weeks out and it's really in sight. So we're taking every day seriously and, you know, prepping like, you know, it's time to start the season.
So looking back on last year, you guys had a little bit of success with the fall series, but of course the big thing was the Challenge Cup. And I'm just going to go back and think about your year because it was your first year with Houston, right? But you didn't get to make your debut until late June because of the pandemic. And you debut in a tournament that has never been a part of the NWSL before. And you end up being tied for the tournament lead in goals with 3. You score in the final, the team wins the final. I guess I know that the idea is to continue to look forward on the current season. But when you look back on last year, is it still surreal to think about how it panned out?
It is, honestly, for me on a personal level. I was dealing with a lot when I came to Houston. You know, I wasn't coming in thinking this is going to be my best year or anything like that. Honestly, I've said in a couple interviews, you know, my 2 goals were to be happy and healthy and just to love soccer again. And that really carried me all the way through. And, you know, obviously becoming a seasoned player, you know, you learn, you know, not to get too down or too high. And obviously that helped and played into it. But from the second I got to Houston, I realized that I fit in and that like this was the place for me. This was home. So, you know, it's definitely surreal to look back and know what a special thing that we did for this club and this organization, but also for each other. And, you know, on a personal level, just to reignite my love for the game and to see myself grow and almost revamp my career in a way was something that, you know, I could have never asked for, you know, anything else.
So it was interesting looking in terms of what has happened in your career. You come into you were drafted into the NWSL. You've now played for 4 clubs, but in the first year of each of those stops, you were able to have immediate success. You scored multiple goals in each of your first seasons with your new clubs. I wanted to ask a little bit about, because it's always a difficult thing, adjusting to a new team. I wanted to know if there was anything you would attribute to that type of success when you joined up with the new team, having a good season right away.
I think I learned early on, you know, my dad's a football coach for over 33 years and, you know, basketball referee and some of the club coaches I've had. Vladko obviously coached me many years of my career. And one of the things other than being coachable was to be adaptable. And I think that's just been such a unique thing for me going into each season. You know, it's hard to make friends and, you know, build chemistry again and again when you're thrown into different environments. But I've always been somebody that loves a challenge. And I think that's just become one of my attributes is to be able to adapt, to be able to be coachable, to learn fast, and to also be a student of the game. And sometimes you get complacent when you've been in a club for so long. So, you know, I've loved that part of my journey and I'm excited to see where it goes.
So now you've spent a year with Houston, and I think the really cool thing about the Challenge Cup run last season was it gave you guys, you were under the microscope. People wanted to learn, who are the Houston Dash? What is it about them? You just talked about at the beginning of this interview about teaching the new players the identity of the club. What would you explain in terms of the character traits of your team, of your identity, what the Houston Dash is all about?
First and foremost, we're the most hardworking team on the field. And if we're not, then we're probably going to lose that game. So we take on that mentality of, we're going to outwork teams. We're going to be tougher than teams. We're going to be closer, tight knit. You look at the person next to you and you're going to battle with them first and foremost. And then, I think what makes us different is some of the qualities that James has instilled into our culture, which is, respect and trust and attitude and effort. And we really stick to those. We had to talk today, just the minor details of what's like to be a professional. It's easy to just, let the equipment guy take all the equipment. It's easy to leave trash out and not do the right things. But for us, it's all the little details that go into being a professional that translate onto the field. And I think doing it for each other. So, we're gritty, we're passionate. And I think, as you saw in the Challenge Cup last year, a lot of people got on the bandwagon because they could just feel the joy through the screen.
I can definitely say those traits stand out. That is definitely for sure. Shea, I want to expand a little bit and talk about the NWSL as a whole, because last year there was a lot of fear in terms of what the pandemic could have done to all sports leagues, not just, you guys, but the NWSL were really one of the leaders, one of the trendsetters when it came to dealing with the pandemic, finding a solution for you guys to still have matches. We're able to limit what the pandemic was doing. And so far this season, in terms of the testing, there's been a razor thin amount of cases in your league, while other leagues have struggled to kind of contain that. I just want to ask, from your perspective, from a player perspective, what is the league doing with either testing or protocols or things like that that has helped attribute to the fact that you guys have been able to stay away from the bad parts of the pandemic?
First and foremost, Lisa Baird has been monumental for this league and the way that she has stepped in. I mean, she stepped in March of last year. I mean, no one wants that job. And for her to come in and say, you know what, we're going to figure something out, and this is how we're going to do it, was something that I think is incredible. And I hope that is recognized for the rest of time. I also think that, it takes a village, and our medical task force team has been incredible, and the doctors have stepped up. I think we've really seen a change in women's soccer in terms of resources and just being treated like actual professional teams with standards. And actually the pandemic has helped that. I think, it's easy to cut corners, and they didn't want to do that. So I think the Challenge Cup last year was a great example of doing something right. And, we did pull it off early, but we did it right. It wasn't like we tried to be the first ones out there. It was like, we figured out how to do it quickly. Fortunately, we have a smaller league, more intimate league that I think allowed us to have a tournament a little bit more earlier than some of the other sports leagues out there. But, they did it right. And I think just the NWSL community and culture and just the whole league in general did an incredible job.
Well, another thing going for the league right now would be the broadcasting rights. You guys are now in a couple years into this deal with CBS. This year, all of the Challenge Cup matches will be streamed on Paramount+. A few are going to be on CBS Sports Network. And, of course, the final is going to be on CBS again, thank goodness. I just wanted to ask again from your perspective, I don't know how much players get a chance to watch all the other games going on, but in terms of being a part of a major streaming service, what does that mean for you guys and mean for the league?
It's huge. I've said from day one, when people say, what's the next step for the NWSL, and it's exposure and being able to have accessibility for people that don't normally watch women's soccer, because when they watch it, they love it, and we get fans, just by building those personal relationships, but also, the amount of people that watched that final and then were like, I'm a Shea Groom fan. Like, it was that easy, so just to be streamed on a legitimate site that gives us a lot of exposure, I think is just absolutely monumental. And I'm so excited for this year's Challenge Cup, because I think it's going to blow up even more and just give people a lot of excitement. I know for the city of Houston, just that exposure to know that they have a women's team, and they have a women's team that brought home a championship, and they want to defend that. So, ticket sales have been looking incredible for us, and I'm just excited that the whole world gets to see women's football on the national stage.
Well, that's really good to hear. And of course, with the Challenge Cup coming up, there will be a new team involved, and I want to talk to you a little bit about that. You, of course, are originally from Liberty, Missouri. you were drafted into the league by FC Kansas City, and now after a little bit of a hiatus, Kansas City once again has an NWSL franchise. So just wanted to ask you, what does that mean to you, and what does that mean for the fans back home in Kansas City?
Oh gosh, it means everything to me. I'm, dash on forever right now, but at the same time, Kansas City was, my home, and I helped build that club and won a championship with that club. Hugh Williams, the coach, he coached me since I was 8 or 9 years old, and just that entire organization is so special to me, and all the people that worked so hard, and to see the fans, the Blue Crew, who's the supporters group there. They just experienced so much heartbreak watching that team leave. And I think for all of us, it was hard. It's kind of like broke up the band. We had such, honestly, the resources weren't great, but we had just such an incredible time there with Blagco and what we were managing to build despite the conditions. And so I'm so excited they done it right. I mean, the girls are being treated incredibly, and I'm excited to go home and be able to play in front of my family again and have that just special moment, intimate moment with the people that I love and that love watching me do what I love. So it's so special, and just super excited that Kansas City has a team again.
All right, so now let's look ahead to this current season. 2 weeks' time, Houston Dash, Chicago Red Stars, rematch of last year's Challenge Cup final. Only way that you can open up this year's Challenge Cup, I think. Both rosters are going to be loaded once again. I know that there are a couple of women are going to be called into the U.S. women's national team, so there might be some people missing. But still, your roster's loaded, their roster's loaded. What are our expectations of this match? Is it going to go anything down like it did last year, or are you expecting something a little bit different?
No, I mean, I think it's the first game. There's going to be a lot of jitters and things like that, and some new players making some debuts for both teams. And I think there's a lot to prove on both sides. Obviously, Chicago's, been in that little bit of a rut where they've been to those championship games, so they haven't won. And, if I were them, I'd want revenge. And, being on our side, we're defending our title and we don't lose at home. So I think it's going to be an incredible game. And we still have a lot to prove. I think we still have a little bittersweet taste in our mouth, not having a star above our crest, winning that championship. So that's kind of been our focus in terms of, we still have more to prove. We still have a chip on our shoulder, and we still don't feel we have the respect that, we thought we deserved after the run that we had. So I'm excited to get out there. I think the fans are going to be extremely excited, and we're just ready to have some football back.
All right, Shea, I'll get you out of here on this. Obviously, we're working our way towards back having a full setup with fans in attendance, coming up, trying to get through the pandemic. I know it's been tough for you guys not to have that type of full support there. Of course, I also know about what the city of Houston has had to deal with, especially at the beginning of the year with the inclement weather that brought about some tough times, and how you guys have been able to help kind of cure some of those ailed hearts. I wanted to ask you a little bit to end up here. If you have a message to the fans, to the supporters here of Houston for this upcoming season, just want to know what you've thought about them and what you want to let them know.
Just that Houston's an incredible city. I've said it so many times. I align so much with this city, just with how diverse it is, how resilient it is, how tough it is, and gritty, and how it comes together in times of need. And I've seen that time and time again, obviously with the pandemic, but also, like you said, with the inclement weather, with Black Lives Matter movement, obviously being George Floyd's hometown, the city bands together, and that is what the Houston Dash will do every single game, is represent the city the same way that it represents itself, and just, being there for each other and fighting and being gritty and being resilient. And, that's us. We are Houston, and, we're going to hold it down.
Well, I know that you do that city proud, and you have a lot of fans back home here who will be cheering you on. And again, very excited for the season come up here. 2 weeks time, Houston Dash versus the Chicago Red Stars. Looking forward to another great NWSL season. Shea, thank you so much for joining me on the show, and also good luck this year.
Thank you so much. Yes, tune in April 9th. Hold it down.
My thanks to Shea Groom for joining me on the show. That'll do it for this episode of the Gateway to Soccer Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. There's so much great soccer going on right now, and so much great soccer on the horizon. Good to be back, and I can't wait to be talking with you all next week on a brand new episode. Thanks again, and have a great weekend.